You guys asked for it. It's time for the ultimate guide to the spider foes. Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well, and welcome to another ultimate guide. This time we're going to be tackling those spider foes, and joining me as ever on this, and someone who is a bit of an authority when it comes to spider foes, you could say he's a bit of a scientist himself, is Mr. Quinn Duggan. Quinn, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a neat trick, Rich, that sense of yours.
Quinn, we're going to do our ultimate guide, aren't we? So as a recap to everyone, because it has been a couple of weeks since we last did this, really the idea of this is for new players coming into the game and they're looking to pivot out of the core box into another affiliation, or indeed just anybody looking to pick up a new affiliation as well. So me and Quinn have put together two rosters. The first one is a budget roster based around the sort of 3-box challenge that you may have seen doing the rounds over the last 12 to 18 months. And then the second one is where Quinn gets to spend all of my money and buys whatever the hell he wants to buy and puts those characters in. Let's jump straight in to the Spider Foes budget roster. So we've got Green Goblin, we've got Lizard, Craven, Venom, Dr. Octopus, Baron Zemo, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Iron Man, and Ultron. It's fair to say, Quinn, isn't it, having Dr. Octopus in the core box affiliated helped us out quite a lot with this, because we were really toing and froing as to whether or not Venom made it in this roster. We both wanted him in, but having two single packs in there, whilst it brings the cost right down, this is the cheapest roster we've put together, it does make it a little bit more difficult when it comes to building an actual squad. But because we had that Dr. Octopus from the core box, it made it that much easier, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. And Doc Ock's a good character, right?
Really good in Spider Foes as well.
Really like Doc Ock. People shit on him. I really like him.
He's brilliant, and he also, he brings along with him a really good tactics card. So he's not bringing it, but in combination with Green Goblin, a really nice tactics card that you'll see. Does play into this roster somewhat, but will definitely play into the other roster more. The thing I like about that as well, Quinn, is we've got those 5 affiliated characters there that very nicely add up to 17 threats. And more often than not, they're probably going to be the 5 characters that you're playing at that threat level, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So let's have a look then at team tactics cards. So we have taken Sinister Traps, we've got Well-Laid Plans, we've got Lethal Protector, Blind Obsession, Patch Up, Brace for Impact, Disarm, Sacrifice, Trip Up, and Mission Objective. Let's start with the affiliation cards, which is Sinister Traps. Just run us through how that works and how it can be used to really cause some problems for your opponent round one.
So at the start of the game, you play the card. That's how that works. If you forget it, tough luck, because I've forgotten it before. You only have to play it afterwards. But you play the card. You pick one of the objective tokens on the board. This can be Extract or Secure. And you place the Sinister Traps marker on it. And basically what this does is, the first time anyone gets within, I believe, range 2 of it,
it is.
You get to roll 5 dice. For every hit, crit, or wild in the result, the character that moved in range takes damage. And then if the roll did damage, you get to push them short. And then, obviously, the token goes away. Now, this can be really nice for just getting rid of, half of the board, potentially, in certain matchups. For example, on hammers, if you have priority, you can effectively force your opponent to not score 2 hammers turn 1, whereas you still get to.
And you deploy this after, or you play this card, Quinn, don't you, after we've deployed all of our characters as well. So you get to see the makeup of the board. So if you've got Corvus on one side waiting to pick up a hammer, I'll just pop a little Sinister Traps down there and make it harder for him to pick up. I think it's worth saying as well, Quinn, isn't it, that range of 2, it's when you finish a movement within range 2, doesn't it? So you can pass over it if you're out of range 2, but you've got to finish a movement within range 2.
There is also an important caveat that your guys can trigger this as well.
This is true. Yes, this is absolutely true.
Which is absolutely delightful when someone uses a bow type effect on like your Green Goblin and just wanders him into it and he explodes.
Yeah, I do really like this card, Quinn. I think especially on maps where you don't want to be playing out wide. As you say, it almost funnels people in a little bit, doesn't it? And as you say, can just take out one side of the board completely and removes, I suppose, one of those round one easy VPs for your opponent to pick up as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, you recently put out that Shield Herbs video.
Yes,
Slap the
absolutely.
sinister traps down on that herb. Bye-bye, Hulk.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's important to note that the push is resolved straight away. So you land, you are attack, you explode the bomb, the traps. If you do damage, you're pushed straight away. You may not have had an opportunity to interact with whatever it is you were trying to go and get. So yeah, it can be a really, really nice control piece.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that I don't think you take in every game. It is sort of a situational thing of whether you think that you'll actually be able to gain something out of that denial. But typically you are going to take it, but just making you aware that there are situations where you don't.
Quinn, one of my favourite cards for the Spider Foes is not actually even a Spider Foes card, and that is Well Laid Plans. This thing is just craziness on a stick. You know me.
Good, isn't it?
It's I like anything that causes chaos and destruction on the battlefield. Well Laid Plans is up there for me with things like Lovable Misfits, where there are things that can happen, and if they happen, all hell breaks loose. But equally, you can play this card and nothing happens.
It's a very rare instance where nothing happens with this card.
It's rare that nothing happens, yes. But Well Laid Plans, Quinn, how does it work? What's so good about it?
Okay, so it's technically an unaffiliated card, but the place you're going to see it most often is Foes because the characters involved. So it involves Doc Ock and Green Goblin. They both pay 3 power each to play the card, and effectively, all of the objectives had secret bombs on them. Ooh. So you roll 5 dice for every enemy character that's holding an objective token across the entire board, right? There's no range on this, you just do it. And if you roll these 5 dice, for every crit and wild you get, you roll 5 dice individually for each character. For every crit and wild you get in the roll, that character takes a damage per result, and if they take damage, they drop all objective tokens they're holding.
Yeah, and it's important because it's just your opponents. So not only did he put bombs on everything, he preemptively knew at that very moment in time which objectives did.
Scanners, there's definitely some sort of piece of media out there where, like, there's like a gun where like the handle reads like your palm print or something, right?
Yeah.
That's not a thing I'm imagining.
That's
I can't remember what it's from.
Judge Dredd, I want to say.
It is Judge Dredd, yeah. It's the Judge Dredd executioner thing.
Yeah. But yeah, chaos ensues. And Quinn, you can do this in a couple of ways, can't you? Because the nice thing is that you get to place all of those objectives.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
It's like they've been dropped as if the character holding them had been dazed. So you place them all wherever you want and just scoop them all up and run off.
Yeah, scoop them all and run off, or you just take 3 VPs off your opponent at the end of a round. You can use it as a bit of a VP savior, can't you, towards the end of a round as well. So Quinn, Lethal Protector. People will know this card. Venom is, as we mentioned, we really wanted to include him in this roster because we think he's a linchpin in the Spider Foes. He just does so much. His damage output is really, really good. But that reactive ability, how many times have you seen it where he's down to his last, 1, 2 health, and he just gets to do that trigger, so many snacks with We Are Venom, and just heals himself for 3, 4 damage, and he's back to almost full health. He's really, really good, and Lethal Protector doesn't guarantee that, but it forces your opponent into a position where they have to place an attack into Venom. And especially with his 4 physical defense, that can often work out quite nice for Venom, can't it?
Yeah, it really can. Like Venom's one of those characters that is just massively overlooked a lot of the time. Like everyone when you bring up Venom, everyone sort of goes, "Oh yeah, Venom, he's good," but I don't ever think they appreciate it to the full extent of how ludicrous he is. He's genuinely one of the best 4s in the game, right?
Yeah, he's really, really good. What I will say is that you've got to be very clever with him about who you're coming up against and where you deploy him. Guardians, as an example, I played against Web Warriors this weekend. They had Venom, and the guy who I was playing against put Venom on one side first, and I was like, okay, well, Star-Lord and Rocket go there and murder Venom before he can get to him. You know, range 4, range 5 attack. Venom doesn't like them. He likes range 3 attacks. So yes, I agree, Quinn, he's really, really good. But I think there's some consideration you need to...
There's nuance to it.
Yeah, definitely. Then rounding it up, we've got Patch Up Brace for Impact, 2 restricted cards that come in the core box, and then Disarm, Sacrifice, Trip Up, and Mission Objective. Fairly standard cards there, Quinn, that we've seen from the core box. They're sort of the generic ones, aren't they?
Yeah, they're kind of just the best of the bunch, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Crisis cards, we are limited to the 6 from the core box itself. So we've got Struggle for the Cube, Skrulls, Spider Infected, Deadly Meteors, Infinity Formula, and Riot Spark. Being brutally honest, Quinn, I don't really think we care too much about that because the threat level is 17. We've got a really nice 5-wide 17 threat. Obviously, these aren't optimal for some of the plays that we want to do with things like well-laid plans and sinister traps and that sort of thing. But we'll get on to what we'll swap out in the next roster. But are there any of those 6 that you see as being any major concern for Spider Foes?
I don't think they're the biggest fan of Skrulls, just because it means you're rolling less times with well-laid plans, means you're doing less damage, means it's going on a single character. Also, more opportunities for it to just not work, which isn't the best. Also, Sinister Traps works less on it because disincentivizing going to one of the 3 scrolls doesn't actually do anything because you just ignore it and go for the other 2 because they are exactly the same in terms of odds.
It's not like Senators, is it, where it's actually on the token itself. It's decided by dice rather than one of the tokens is the thing. So, yeah, I mean, is that one of the setups here, one of the cards where you would maybe leave well-laid plans out and Sinister Traps out, or?
I'd imagine so.
Yeah. So, Quinn, let's have a quick look then at the playstyle distribution. And these guys sit very, very firmly in that sort of attrition and then just behind in control with a little bit of support there. I'm going to say they're fairly good at all of these things. They're pretty consistent across the board. They don't have a lot of support, but the support they've got is good. The attrition, and we've already got into some of the attrition things, and you can see by the characters that we're taking, they've got a really, really good attrition game. I want to focus on the control side of it a little bit, Quinn. Where does the control come from for Spider Foes, and why is it so good?
I mean, Venom is sort of like the star player in terms of control, right? He's got that web snare, which is one of the best control effects in the game. It's ludicrous how good that superpower is. He's also got a character throw. Doc Ock has a character throw. Lizard has a character throw. You've also got Goblin, and he doesn't appear in this roster, but in the later one we'll see Mysterio as well, who both have effects related to where your opponent moves and sort of area denial.
Yep.
Yeah, those are sort of where the control elements lie.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you can also add in lethal protector there to an element as well, can't you? Of controlling who your opponent's attacking. So Quinn, let's take a quick look then at the pros. We've already spoke sort of around some of them. I want to start off then with that character displacement that you just mentioned there, and I think one of the real key things with Venom is he's one of the few characters in the game now who can displace with zero restrictions, isn't it? A lot of the pushers and pull. Sorry, I always say pulls, but pushers off the back of attacks or throws off the back of attacks. Most things now have a number next to them. It seems to be that actually it's Venom and the rest of the Web Warriors that sort of missed most of that, really, didn't they, when it comes to their sort of web line pull type thing. So why is that really important, to be able to move characters around, especially, out of activation?
One, it can sort of pull them out of defensive bubbles. So the likes of, getting them outside of range 2 of Captain America for bodyguards. Also pulls them closer to your team, which means that you're more likely to be able to be in range for attacks without having to move, which means you're more action efficient. Also, that same thing sort of applies where if they're holding an objective, you can pull them in, kill them, take it away from them. And generally, if one of your opponent's characters is isolated from the rest of the group, you do really have that potential to just burn them down twice and just have them off the board.
Spider-Foes are pretty good at targeting down a character, aren't they? They've got some good attacks. They've got, as you say, throws as well to be able to dish out damage without using actions. And then you've got, Craven with his expert tracker, I think it's called, that gives everyone an extra die as well that round.
Yep. And you could even chuck a corner of the beast on them as well to make sure that if they run away, they might die anyway.
They may just die anyway. So we've also got an affiliated core box character. We've already mentioned how much value that brings into the affiliation and how it meant then that, realistically we could unlock Venom. I think if that wasn't the case, we'd have probably had to stick with Mysterio and Carnage, which doesn't feel as good. I feel like...
Mysterio is fine.
Mysterio's really good.
Exists.
Yep. Mm-hmm. He exists, yes. And then cons, Quinn, because there are always going to be some cons to list. We don't have any mystic attacks in this roster, and it's a theme, isn't it? I think we've said it on most of the budget rosters now, unless they are a mystic heavy attack affiliation. We tend to not get them in these budget rosters. We've also not got any access to any of the big hitter characters, so any 5+ threat characters. And actually, there are no 5+ threat characters in the Spider-Foes at all. But I feel that's more of a sort of tell of the affiliation, just how they play. That's kind of not their shtick, really, is it? Having a big hitter in their team, sort of 5-6 threat.
Well, yeah, kind of the affiliation bonus as a whole, like the leadership, kind of somewhat incentivizes going wide because you get more opportunities to use the offensive defense reroll. But equally, probably not the best idea.
And Quinn, let's just go over that leadership ability then, Quinn, because it has been changed. I know we've done it in other videos, but obviously the power was removed, wasn't it? But this is all around dice manipulation, but rather than your own dice, you get to manipulate your opponent's dice, don't you?
Yeah. So it gives you once per turn, so once during a character's go, pretty much. Or at least for the purposes of this, that's how useful it is. You get to reroll one of your opponent's defense dice. And you can choose which attack to do, so it doesn't have to be the first or anything like that. And this is done after you modify your own dice, which means that the opponent will have already modified their dice, which means if they had cover, they would have already changed that die face to be a shield, and therefore you could reroll that if they had nothing else.
Yeah, and that timing's really important with this, isn't it? Because you start to look at certain things, and so the order is, as the attacking character, I modify my dice. Then as the defending character, you modify your dice. Then I modify your dice. Then you modify my dice. So yeah, really important to get that order of things correct, especially as you mentioned, Quinn, when you start coming up against things like cover and that sort of thing. It's also worth mentioning that, again, going back to Venom, he's getting a huge more potential from this because of his reactive attack as well.
Yeah,
because he can use it on his
opponent's turn, and therefore you get another use of it.
Yeah, exactly that. Which I think is just one of the other reasons why he works, so well in the affiliation. Let's have a quick look, Quinn, at the packs that we have used. So the four that we've taken: CP01, CP21, CP58, CP09, coming in, Quinn, at a very, very respectable $189.74. So actually the cheapest of all of the rosters that we've put together so far.
I mean, that's what 2 single packs will get you.
2 single packs, yes, and the fact that we've been able to use so much from that core box as well. But I think, even though even though this is a budget roster, as you'll see in the next one that we put together, we're not really losing anything from this. And I know we've said it a few times, Quinn, haven't we, about other rosters as well. It's a great starting point as your first 3 boxes, and then you can add additional things in to then move up to the sort of no money, no object one, because I don't think there's a single character or card that we're taking here that we are not using in the next roster.
Well, there are
outside
definitely
of
cards.
Outside of the core box, sorry, is what I mean, Quinn, in terms of the extra packs that we've purchased.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
So let's go into the final 4 parts then, where we're going to look at or score the overall roster itself. So starting off then, Quinn, with cost, and it's well under that $200 mark. So for me, this just gets $1 out of 5. This is a really, really good value roster, and a lot of these characters as well, you're going to see them used outside of affiliation quite a bit as well, aren't you? Lizard's getting a lot of love at the moment in other rosters. Criminal Syndicate, he sees a lot of play in. Goblin is part of Criminal Syndicate. Craven, is Craven part of Criminal Syndicate?
Craven is part of Syndicate,
yeah. You've got Venom, who's obviously part of the Web Warriors as well. I think the only character that's single affiliate or mono affiliated is Doc Ock.
Yeah.
But as you guys have seen, he goes in most of our budget rosters as well, so you're getting value from him anyway. So next thing, Quinn, is difficulty. And this is really how difficult this roster and affiliation is to play. And there's a few different things that sort of play into this, Quinn, isn't there? First of all, the mechanics. And I would say in this roster, there are not too many characters with particular mechanics that are very difficult, but we've got characters that change a lot from injured to their healthy side. So Green Goblin's card changes quite a lot, doesn't it, in terms of defensive tech and then in terms of what he can do. Sinister Traps, Well-Laid Plans, Lethal Protector, whilst they're easy enough to play, learning when to use them, obviously with Sinister Traps, remembering to play it is the key thing, Quinn, as you know. So we've given this a 2.5 skulls out of 5 for difficulty. So it's definitely not the hardest roster in the world to play, Quinn, but I think it's a step up, isn't it, from those sort of core box and some of the other rosters that we've put together.
Yeah, there's a degree more complexity than just smash face.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's where that control element comes in there as well. And then lastly then is on the adaptability. And I'm going to say, Quinn, this is really, for me at least, where on this budget roster, and maybe actually Spider Foes in general, do suffer a little bit. They have none of the things that we speak about that go into a very adaptable roster. So they're a single leader. He's a single 4-threat leader as well, and they have no affiliated 2-threat characters in the game. One of the very few, I think, now, there's maybe only 2 or 3 others that don't have 2-threat characters, and they do hurt a little bit from that, don't they? Because whilst at 17 threat, they're really good. At you go 1 threat up or down there, so at 16 or at 18, they can struggle quite a bit. At
suddenly
14,
things become a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
We can just sort of hope that somewhere in the near future we'll get another sort of set of reinforcements for them, can't we?
I'd be very surprised. I think, especially as it's Spider Foes and not Sinister Six, they've opened themselves up to be able to include all sorts of different characters, and there are so many options within
Oh, there's so many. Like,
the sort of rogues gallery, isn't there, of Spider-Man?
I mean, like Rhino being a Juggernaut type character would be cool. Like
Yep.
Electro handing out Shock, Shocker handing out Shock. I guess. Guess
Yeah.
that'd be some overlap between the two of them. Vulture being like sort of a Sam Wilson-esque character. Mr. Negative could be cool.
Oh, Missed Thing, a negative. I've not thought that one. Sandman's another one that I'd love to see.
Yeah. Big, like smashy one, and then like,
Oh,
you absolutely
you've got to have the transformability on them. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. As long as they don't call him embiggened. I really don't like that. I really don't like that
Big
term.
Sandman.
It just doesn't sound right, doesn't it?
No, it's not a good word. Don't like it.
So on adaptability, we do score them a little bit low. So they are only scoring 2 wilds out of 5 for adaptability. And as I say, Quinn, that really does come down to that single leader and the fact that they don't have any 2 threats. But hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe in June, who knows, we get something that addresses that. And then lastly, Quinn, is the overall score. So we take all of these different things, the cost, how good they are at the attrition control, support, ease of use, adaptability, that sort of thing. Put it all into some maths and then spit out a number at the back end. And we're scoring this one, Quinn, a very respectable 6.7 out of 10, which for a budget roster is right where you would expect it to be. I think when you're going to have some real fun with this roster, you're going to be able to turn up to your casual, Friday night games, play with friends, get some reps in to really learn. Because I think the thing I like about this, Quinn, is that you're going to learn the core and the essence of Spider Foes from this roster. And then you can add in the other elements once you've learned those core things, can't you, very, very easily?
Yeah, very easily.
So, Quinn, on to the second of our 2 rosters. And this time I gave you all of the money in the world and you got to spend it in any way you wanted, you wish. So let's jump straight in and take a look at the characters that we've taken. And Quinn, you'll see that the first 5 characters are exactly the same. So Goblin, Lizard, Craven, Venom, and Doc Ock. Quinn, the only other addition in terms of affiliated characters that we've gone with is Mysterio. So why Mysterio? Why Mysterio and not Mysterio and Carnage, for example? What does Mysterio bring?
Well, I mean, I'll answer the Carnage question first. Carnage is bad Venom. We don't want bad Venom. We can just have Venom. But going back to Mysterio, Mysterio is a really interesting piece because initially when you look at him, he seems slow as balls, right?
Not only that, you look at his defensive lines, you look at and you just go, this guy's terrible. And I've seen, Quinn, so many people not just come out and go, Mysterio's terrible, why does anybody play him? But genuinely ask the question of, I see Mysterio being played a lot. I can't get him to work. What is it I'm missing? And I think that's the key thing with Mysterio, isn't it? People often overlook him as a character.
Yeah, because there are so many incredibly fun and unique things about Mysterio. So, I mean, you look at that stat line of 115, right? I think he's got like 6 stamina on at least one of his sides, from what I can remember.
Yes, yep.
So you look at those stats and you're like, oh, he'll die to everything. But then you look at whichever superpower it is, that is the Enchantress style, he uses Mystic unless you pay.
I think it's smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
Smoke and mirrors, and then there's the other one like illusion, blah blah blah. Yeah,
smoke and mirrors, and then Master of Illusions.
Master of Illusions. So smoke and mirrors, sure, that's the one that lets him do the Enchantress style thing of using his Mystic defense against attacks unless his opponent pays power, right?
Yep.
Then you factor in that one physical defense, right? And you're like, oh, he must be really vulnerable to like throws and collision damage. But no, Master of Illusions means that he rolls his 5 Mystic defense against collisions, which means that he's actually surprisingly tanky, because whereas most characters you can bypass defensive effects with throws, he actually has one baked in that works against them, right?
It's really, really nice. The stealth as well, that goes into his tricks and traps really, really nicely. So if somebody wants to attack him, they have to get within range 3. If they get within range 3, he can spend power on tricks and traps. Yes, it costs 3, but he's a bit of a battery as well, his old Mysterio. He can generate some power. And if he gets off a damage, he gets to make a short advance, which, unless somebody's moved up really close to him, then he's going to probably be out of range for them to make their attack.
There's also, going back to the power battery aspect of him, he gains power for every time he rolls a blank.
Yeah. Which,
if you're looking out for that, oh boy, it's real good.
Yeah. And just to clarify there, Quinn, because this catches a few people out as well, this is any time he rolls dice, not just attacks, not just defense, not just dodges. If he's searching for the core and rolls a blank, he gains a power.
Yeah. Which effectively makes that interaction free.
It's really good. Tricks and traps, Quinn. If he rolls a blank, he gains a power, which makes that 2 power for that one. It's really, really good. And
then you get onto his attacks as well, right?
Yes.
Because you sort of look at it and you're like, oh, range 3 4-dice Mystic doesn't seem great. But then you factor in that he's in Spider Foes, so you're getting a reroll on your opponent's defense. And the fact that if he deals damage, he gets to move the opponent short, which then lets him trigger tricks and traps and do all the other random crap he does. He's got a very nice sort of self-contained ecosystem for just doing the stuff he likes to do, right?
There are a few better back point holders in the game for the threat level than Quentin Beck. He's got a lot of tech that makes it very, very difficult for your opponent to get around. And do you know what? Some people may look at it, Quinn, and say smoke and mirrors, it only costs 2 power. So some people, Quinn, as well, might look at it and go, well, smokes and mirrors, it's only 2 power, but spending 2 power before you do your attack into a 3 threat is quite expensive, especially when, most builders out there are going to be 5 dice on average. Even into 1 dice, you're only doing, so I think it's 2.5, almost, between 2.5 and 3 damage on average. So you're only generating a net 1 power at the back end of it. So it's, he's a lot better than what people give him credit for. And I think he's a real core piece when it comes to the Spider Foes. It's a shame we couldn't include him in the budget roster, because I think it would have bumped the budget roster up quite significantly. And I'm going to say, Quinn, alongside the crisis cards, really it's Mysterio that's doing the heavy lifting in this roster in terms of bumping its score up from where it was to where it's going to be, because he is the difference for me in this roster.
Mysterio and Crisis, I think for me, are the big changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've also included a 5-threat hitter, something that we were missing from the budget roster, and we've gone with Ghost Rider.
We have indeed.
Now, you know me, Quinn. I love me a bit of Jonathan Blaze, which is how you have to pronounce his name. And I know the way that I play him in Guardians, the confusion that it gives your opponent of, do I go to attack Ghost Rider, but then if I attack Ghost Rider, I'm not attacking anybody else, but then if I attack everybody else, I'm going to give Ghost Rider loads of power and he can just zoom around the board and just, inflict murder. I gather we're taking him for very similar reasons.
There's another reason, and that reason is Wicked Judgment, because sort of, as we mentioned, there's a lot of chip damage in this faction. The whole sort of point of this more expensive roster is to include more of the chip damage than we could previously, and there's nothing better than when your opponent attacks the character and rolls a bunch of crits in their initial roll, or rolls a couple of crits and those roll into more crits, and you just go, 2 power. Die.
Yeah, I really like it. I think he brings some mystic, which can be really nice. Yes, we've got Mysterio, but as we mentioned, Mysterio's really sat on that back point, right? Very
Yeah,
rarely
like,
is he going to be up the front of the table.
Mysterio's damage output isn't actually from his mystic attacks, it's actually from his tricks and traps, right?
Yeah. Rounding out the roster then, Quinn, we've got Gambit. Now, we spoke about Gambit, didn't we? It was actually a character that you decided to put in there. So what were
Yeah.
your reasonings behind having Gambit in there?
So there is a way to play Spider-Foes in which you focus a great deal on chip damage, right? Chip damage being just sort of small amounts of damage here and there that eventually add up over time. Think death by 1,000 cuts, right? So you've got things like tricks and traps, you've got sinister traps, you've got Goblin's trick or treat, I think it's called, where he can effectively do a terrain throw in your opponent's turn. And then also you've got like sources like Venom's bleed that he does guaranteed from his symbiote tendrils. All of this damage adds up over time. And Gambit kind of just adds to that with his Pocket Ace, I think it's called, which is his ranged attack, where, he does the attack, and then he can add a little something extra to turn one of his hits into a wild, to guarantee the explosive trigger, to then do, like, damage in a little AoE bubble around his target, which just adds on more and more and more, and eventually, like, then you add in well-laid plans as well, and suddenly you just have this turn where all of your opponent's characters just pop out of nowhere, right? And then you just get to sort of run rampant and score as many VPs as you can while setting up for the next turn. There's also the fact that Gambit brings control with him in terms of his little bow staff, because he's got the wild size 3 push on that, which he can be more likely to trigger because of something extra. And then, he's got the Mega Beam of Doom as well, which is always nice.
He does have the Mega Beam of Doom, and then that flurry of cards working with a little something extra is just real nice, isn't it?
And also, you're actually a fair bit more likely to build the power necessary to do that play under foes, because you start throwing the kinetic aces in, and you're re-rolling your opponent's attack dice. It means that you're actually building power in a reasonable way. Gambit's also a decent objective holder because he can run away with his parting shot that's got a different name because they like giving different names to the same ability.
Enhanced agility, I want to say.
Enhanced agility, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so he brings a lot of cool things to the affiliation, I think.
He does.
Also, his model is just gorgeous anyway.
It's a really, really good model. Next up then, we included the Trash Panda. And this is very much in the vein, isn't it, of that chip damage, that,
Yep, because Rocket has booby traps.
Yeah, and it catches so many people out. And what a lot of people don't realise is that you can create a little triangle of death where you've got Goblin at one corner, you've got Rocket at another corner, and you have Mysterio at another. And all it takes is Mysterio to do one bow into the middle of that little pocket of death, and all of a sudden you can trigger all 3 characters' booby traps or equivalent of booby traps into them. And as you say, Quinn, quite often these booby traps, these reactive non-attack damage building things bypass any sort of defensive tech that a character may have. Captain America that adds 2 dice and counts blanks and
you
everything.
Mean Steve Rogers the unkillable?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because all of this type of damage, this chip damage, as Quinn puts it, for the most part, ignores all of these types of things. There are some exceptions, Quinn, aren't there? So invulnerable, I think, still reduces it. Inert, you can still spend the power and reduce it as well. But
there's no superpower in this game called Inert, Rich.
Inert.
There we go.
Words are hard. So yeah, there we go. And then lastly, Quinn, we have brought Toad, the little slippery bugger himself. And this really is going to play into the well-laid plans piece, and also then some of the or one of the extracts that we brought along with us as well, weren't it?
Yeah, big time.
So Quinn, on to Team Tactics cards. We've taken Sinister Traps, Well-Laid Plans, and Lethal Protector, so those core 4 cards that we had in the budget roster. We've then got Medpack and Patch Up, doubling down on the healing. We've got Indomitable, it's there. It's a thing. It's going to get restricted, maybe even banned. Use it whilst you can.
Yeah.
We've also added in 3 more character team tactics cards as well. So obviously with Ghost Rider, we take Deal with the Devil. We've also got then Grand Illusion. And we've also taken Monkey Brain is Lizard Home, which, Quinn, we had access to in the last roster because this comes with Lizard. So why would we, if it's a good enough card to take in this roster, why wouldn't we have taken it in the last one?
Because the crises that we had access to in the last one, we were stuck with the core set 6, which don't make the greatest use of this card. This card is mainly a gamma. It is mainly a gamma card, right?
Yes.
Sort of towards the end of a round, you walk up, you do this with Lizard after like 3 rounds of him building power, and he just sort of does this, unleashes this on everyone, shoves everyone off of points, and potentially, like, you know, allows you to score out all 6 of the VPs that are available for Gamma as a crisis, which can be huge and definitely worth a tactics card.
Oh, 100%.
But it's just one of those things of like, you know, you play this on, let's say, Extremis, and you're like, oh, cool, I pushed 1 person off a point, go me. Ooh.
Yeah, it's not worth it, really, is it? In that one, there may be a couple of others as well. I want to say, is it intrusions that go? They go left to right, don't they? Or is that up and down?
They're a C-map, yeah.
But there's a couple of other ones where it can work, but Gamma is the big one. And let's not forget, Quinn, as well, that explosion that Lizard causes triggers all of those lovely little booby traps and tricks and traps and everything else as well. And on Gamma, not only are you potentially doing damage to your opponent, you can push them. You can quite nicely leave them on 1 health as well, Quinn. In the cleanup phase, they're going to get dazed as well, aren't they? Because
they are.
If they're outside of range 2 of a Gamma shelter, they're going to take some more damage as well. So yeah, really, really like that card. And then lastly is mission objective. We included it in the last one. We have more of a plan in this one, but we'll go on to that when we get into the crisis cards. So crisis cards then, Quinn. We've taken Struggle for the Cube, Fear Grips, and Deadly Legacy Virus. I think Fear Grips and Struggle for the Cube speak for themselves, right? They are high scoring. We have well-laid plans. We can get a huge amount of value from those 2 crises. Deadly Legacy Virus, whilst there's some value as well with the well-laid plans, what else are we bringing in and, talking around Toad and mission objective to sort of try and maximize the potential for Legacy Virus?
Well, with Legacy Virus, sort of your goal is to hold at least one of them at all times in order to prevent your opponent from scoring out. And then eventually, sort of towards the later rounds of the game, you can play your well-laid plans once you've built the power for it. You can use your mission objectives to make... So mission objective is sort of like a defensive card in this scenario because it's making sure that you keep it on your guys, right?
Yes.
You then do your well-laid plans and drop them all, right? Or you drop the ones that you don't have. You can then scoop them up with your other characters, and then that's where Toad comes in, because Toad has a little superpower called Finders Keepers. It costs an action and 2 power, but it lets him take an objective from an ally and put it on himself, which is huge, because this works around the Legacy Virus thing of having to pay 1 more each time you pick one up, because you're not actually picking it up, you're just transferring it.
Yeah.
And Toad's a 2 threat, and he's a 2 threat you don't really care about. So if Toad gets all 3 of the things on him and goes pop, thank you very much. I'll take my half of the VPs. I was going to say, you'll immediately right there.
You'll take 50% of the VPs for that, won't you?
Yeah.
I think that's very much worth it. So, Quinn, on to the 3 secures then. Gamma Wave we've already spoke about. One thing we didn't mention, Quinn, actually is with the addition of Ghost Rider, we've also got a beam attack on there as well, which, I think Ghost Rider only comes into play on Gamma if we're playing at a higher threat. So maybe we picked Gamma and our opponent has, picked 19 threat or something like that. Demons Downtown, this is a 19 threat secure. Why have we taken demons? Obviously, we know we've got a particular character who's got some nice synergy in there.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost Rider's immune to Incinerate, which is always delightful. And then there's obviously the fact that it gives out Incinerate, which is really nice for an attrition team because when your opponent's on fire, turns out they're easier to kill. Who'd
They
have
are
thought?
easier to kill, aren't they? Which is quite nice. We also have superpowered scoundrels form Sinister Syndicate,
Also known as
which
Scoundrels because
is just
that's a lot of
scoundrels.
words.
It is a lot of words, isn't it? So why this one, Quinn? Because we've obviously played it a couple of times with varied success. Do not play it for Guardians. Is my
Play it for Avengers, that's my advice. So Scoundrels is there because effectively the leadership counteracts any sort of benefit your opponent would get from the ambush points. Because you modify your own dice first, therefore using cover to change something into a block. Then the leadership triggers, and you can just make them re-roll it.
yeah.
And even if they get another blank, they can't turn it into a block again because that's not how cover works. Which is really nice. We've also got Venom in the roster who just ignores cover entirely, and then being 5 points, but sort of being quite a spread scenario just means that you can sort of pick your battles a bit easier, if that makes sense. Sort of if there's someone you're unsure about, you sort of put them in the middle, and they can divert to wherever they need to be, or maybe they choose to be the anchor point in the middle, and then you can just have everyone sort of scattered about everywhere else because you've got quite a few mobile characters in foes, right? You've got Craven who can move, hit, move. You've got Goblin who can hit and run. You've got Mysterio who on his own turn is pretty slow, but he can just sort of wobble about the map with tricks and traps. You got Ghost Rider who can just rev his engine and go all over the place. Lizard, a lot of the time with Lizard, you'll just see him do double moves as his activation.
Double moves and a throw at the back end of it. Yeah. It's you're almost incentivized to use him as a mobile character because his attacks are not the best.
No, they're not.
But I mean, I also, just to your point with Mysterio as well, I love the idea of Mysterio on on one of the corner points on Scoundrels as well because
I also don't hate Mysterio with cover.
yeah, exactly right. One even with one dice and cover is still quite nice, and it's important to point out, guys. And I know we've done it in other videos, but it's worth pointing out again. The rule of 2 doesn't apply to the cover you gain from Scoundrels because that's only when it's terrain. So if you gain cover from any other way, even if your opponent is within range 2, you're still going to get cover. The only time you're not going to get cover is if you're coming up against something like Quinn mentioned there, so a character that negates cover like Venom, for example.
Yeah, because he stops modification of dice. He doesn't actually stipulate ignoring cover, but cover is a modification.
Yeah. Or, Captain America's shield throw, that kind of thing. So something that says it doesn't allow you to do something always overrides something that says you get to do it. So yeah, Quinn, I really like those crisis selections. I think they play really, really nicely into the Spider foes. So let's have a quick look then at their playstyle distribution. And really, Quinn, as we've seen with a lot of these rosters and a lot of these affiliation breakdowns, we're just doubling down on what we've already got. So really, this is an attrition control list with a bit of support. They're pretty good at everything, so they score quite highly across all 3. Obviously, support's way down because they just don't have a lot of it. Really, that's where it leans into is the attrition and control side of it. And I feel like the characters we've brought in there only add to that. You've got characters.
And it is an interesting form of attrition because, as we mentioned, it's somewhat centered around that chip damage. They can still hurt people with attacks pretty damn well. That's sort of what their leadership is geared towards.
They can, but it's really weird, isn't it? Because I remember way back when we made the Avengers and Cabal videos and we said, they're both attrition, but they're both the opposite ends of it, right? You've got Cabal who are the attacks, big attacks, try to murder your opponent, and Avengers are outlasting your opponent. And these guys they don't necessarily sit in the middle, but it's a very
Yeah,
deck state of,
they're sort of like the third forgotten point of the triangle, aren't they?
yeah, which is, almost, it's like sneaky damage. I like the only thing you've got to do, Quinn, is remember. That's the one thing I will say. And the other thing I will say, Quinn, as well, about this damage you do to your opponent during their activation. Yes, it can be really good, because if people are not aware, if you daze a enemy character mid-activation, your opponent's turn ends. They don't get a chance to play any more tactics cards or anything like that. The moment that daze token goes on, their turn ends. However, if you do damage and you don't kill them, you have to remember you're giving them power. So just always be aware of the character that you're doing the damage into, and just make sure, are you turning something on for your opponent that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. So that's the only thing I would say, Quinn, about this form of damage, is you've got to be a lot more selective, haven't you, over who and when you use it, because you do want to make sure that you don't get to you don't turn something on that otherwise wasn't possible for them, which I've fallen afoul to. I've done this with, I remember the last time I played, I think it was Daz playing Guardians, and Rocket used a booby traps on Corvus, and it did like 2, and it gave Corvus just enough power to then be able to do a Glaive's Edge with his strike. So the net benefit was bad for me, because it meant he got to do a 5 dice attack including blank. So that's the one thing I would say with it, Quinn, that people should be aware of. Let's take a quick look then at the character packs that we've used, and we've used quite a few, as we tend to do for this. I'm not going to list them all out, you can see them all in the battle card itself, but coming in at a grand total of $619.25. And we've said it once, I'm going to say it again, Quinn. First of all, this is list. Nobody's ever buying at list price. Go to your local gaming store. If your local gaming stores don't offer discount, I mean, Amazon offer discount on these things. We're lucky here in the UK that, most gaming stores are offering sort of between 15 and 25% discount off lists, which is quite nice. But even then, there are some cards in here, Quinn, aren't they, that we've taken that are not completely necessary, right? If you don't want to take Deadly Legacy Virus, you can take that out, right? And you're going to save yourself a Mr. Sinister box. If you're not taking Deadly Legacy Virus, you maybe don't need Toad. So you're saving yourself a Magneto box. So
which is one of the more expensive boxes as well.
Yeah, because you get the constructs as well. I think it's like a $45, $50 box. So,
something like that, yeah.
Indomitable's in there. Is it absolutely necessary? No. Is it a really good card? Yes. But there's always going to be ways that you can shave the cost of this off. This is just the list that we've put together, but don't feel like if you're not spending this much money, you're not going to be competitive, because that's absolutely not the case. You could shave at least $100, $200 off the MSRP here, and still have a very, very competitive list. If you're in the UK as well, why not check out Elysium War Games? They are a local gaming store here in the UK, long-time sponsor of the channel, and it's where I was this weekend, and actually took part in a tournament. More about that on the Weekly Bugle, where Quinn is going to rip into me for it. So Quinn, overall, I think this roster is going to be competitive. I think you're going to be able to turn up and have a really good shot at taking down a tournament. We know players who have won tournaments using maybe not this exact same roster, but very, very similar rosters. This is just our take on it. So let's go to the final 4 parts then. So starting then with cost. $619, Quinn. It's not the most expensive roster that we've put together. It's by no means the cheapest. So I'm giving this $4 out of 5 because it is quite expensive, right? Over $600 for a single team is quite expensive.
Yeah.
Then on to difficulty. I think, Quinn, this may be the most complex roster that we've put together, actually. I think there's a lot of moving parts in this affiliation and in these squads that we're probably going to be using when we're playing with this roster. So because of that, I have given it a 4 out of 5 difficulty, and I think it really, really does warrant it. I think it's one of those rosters where you really need to understand more than just what your characters do. You need to have a good understanding of what your opponent can do as well, because you can you can be undone quite easily. It's quite an unforgiving list, isn't it? I think if you do something wrong, as I say, tricks and trap somebody at the wrong time, give them 2 power, and just turn them on to be able to do a big attack or a throw or something they couldn't have done previously. So being aware of the board state is really, really important. Lastly then is adaptability. And whilst this roster, Quinn, I think is a little bit more adaptable than what we had in the previous roster, it's still lacking those 2 things, which is a cheaper or a second leader and an affiliated 2-threat character. So again, it's going to score 2.5 wilds out of 5 for adaptability. So Quinn, finally on to the total score for the roster, and it's really weird how these work out, because it is our 3rd affiliation that have scored 8.1 for their no money, no limit roster. So it sits alongside Avengers and Air Force in joint 4th position. And I feel, Quinn, that's kind of about right for where Spider Foes are at the moment. I think they're a faction that are overdue. I would be very surprised if we didn't see something for them this year in terms of a 2-threat option, in terms of a bigger hitter, as you say, maybe in the form of a Rhino. It'd be nice to have some more characters with a bit more mobility. I'm thinking more, maybe something like a Vulture or something like that. Maybe even as a second leader for the affiliation as well would be quite nice. But overall, Quinn, what are your thoughts on where Spider Foes are right now as an affiliation?
I think they're in sort of a decent place. As you mentioned, there are a lot of things that they could get in the very near future that would bump them up a great deal, right? But as they are right now, they're really fun to play, I find, because I stuck with them for quite a while, like even before the errata, so back when
in the dark days.
in the dark days, I still played Spider Foes. I had a great time with them just because I like making silly noises with Mysterio.
Ooh, Mysterio! And that's the one thing I would say, Quinn, is they are fun. And I think we're gonna see a lot of people, or we have seen a lot of people play Spider Foes. Obviously, we're off the back not too long ago of the Spider-Man movie. I think that got a lot of people into Spider Foes as well. I was quite surprised we didn't see a Spider Foes release alongside it. Not necessarily a character from the Spider Foes universe, but there were more things happening in that sort of Spider-Verse. There's the second Into the Spider-Verse movie coming as well. Morbius is very much in that Spider-Verse universe as well. So, could we see Morbius in there as a Spider-Foes stroke Midnight Suns character? I think that
could be cool. Yeah,
definitely a possibility. And as you mentioned, there's a whole plethora of other characters as well. So, I'm really looking forward to our ultimate battle this time round, because obviously the second part of this video next week will be the Web Warriors. So one of us will play Web Warriors, the other one will play the Spider Foes. I'm really hoping I get Spider Foes. They're most definitely more my play style, more attrition than control.
Now I might just have to force you to play Web Warriors.
Well, it depends.
Actually, you know what? No, I don't force you to do anything, because I think as tradition dictates now at this point, I always play the budget roster.
Well, you always lose the roll-off, and I always pick the one that
even when I
want.
win the roll-off, I pick the budget one as well.
You pick the budget one as well. Yeah, absolutely. But there we go, guys. That is our ultimate guide to the Spider Foes. If you found this video useful in any way, shape, or form, all we ask is that you leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. And leave us a comment down in the comment section below if there are any characters that you've taken with Spider Foes that have worked really, really well. If you want to support the channel even further, we do have our Patreon up and running. There'll be a link down in the description below. And And we also have our merch store as well, where you can find a whole bunch of MCP-inspired apparel. Lastly, we've got our Discord server. There's sort of almost 400 people on there now, talking all things MCP, from roster building through to just general shit talking of Quinn. There we go. That's the second curse word we've ever had in any of these videos.
I mean, you say that, I said shit like 2 minutes into this video, which you might have to edit out.
But it gets edited out.
Does
so
it?
Go check out the Discord. It's a really, really
Censoring
good
me,
place.
Rich.
I am censoring you, yes. Guys, as always, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.
See you.